Welcome to Building Healthy Relationships, the 4 Habits podcast, helping you enjoy better harmony at home, thrive at work, and win at life. Here are your hosts, Dr. Andrea and Jon Taylor-Cummings, recognized authorities on the subjects of improving work relationships and cultures, as well as couple and home relationships.
Well, hello and a warm welcome to our podcast guests around the world, whether it's good morning to you, good day, good evening. We're really glad that you're joining us for this session. We're really excited about the conversation. We have as our guest, our expert in professional relationships, Andy Lopata. Andy, really good to have you today and looking forward to our conversation.
Thank you, Andrea. It's really lovely to join you.
And we want to do you justice so that everybody understands the powerhouse that we have in the room today, and we'll get as excited about the conversation as we are. And so we're going to give you the proper introduction with your bio before we get going.
Let people know who's talking to them here. So Andy Lopata is a specialist in professional relationships and has been for nearly 25 years. He was called one of Europe's leading business networking strategists by the Financial Times, and a true master of networking by the Independent and Forbes.com. A very experienced international speaker and podcast host. Andy is the author of, I was going to say 5, but I think it's 6 books now.
Yep, the latest one we'll be talking about. Yeah.
And he's been quoted in a number of other books and regularly quoted in the international press. I think your 6th book was just out a few months ago, or a few weeks ago even.
A couple of months ago, yeah.
A couple of months ago now. Okay, well, congrats on that. The Financial Times Guide to Mentoring. We'll be talking a bit about that. Andy is a former president of the Fellows Community and a 2-time board member of the Professional Speaking Association, UK and Ireland, and a fellow of the Learning and Performance Institute, as well as a member of the Meetings Industry Association and Association of Business Mentors. He's also one of just 32 recipients of the PSA's top honor, the Award of Excellence. And the PSA is the Professional Speaking Association. So a privilege to have you on the call with us, Andy. Really great to unpack some of the tips and insights you have for building professional relationships. We'll have so much with some of the stuff that we do, so really good to get your insights.
And we just have to understand a bit more of the context and the person behind all the wonderful things you've achieved and the passion that you are pursuing now. Tell us a little bit more of your background, what got you to where you are now, and the passion that drives you.
Wow, so big question. How long do you want the answer? In terms of the space in which I operate, it was 25 years last month that I celebrated working in the space of networking and professional relationships. So I won't give you the whole 25 years and certainly not the years before that. But I started out in this space just a mile or so up the road from where you are at the moment, as we were just talking about before we pressed record.
Yeah.
When my dad had co-founded a business network in Potter's Bar, and he in Hertfordshire, and he and his partner were building that up. That was at the end of December 1998, and in May 1999 he had just they built it to 4 groups, and I quit my job. And I quit my job saying, I'm never working for anyone else ever again. I'm going to become a freelance writer. And I was going to write about sport and travel.
Oh, wow.
And he said, come and help us out while you get some commissions. I got business cards printed. That's as far as I got. 25 years later, I've written 6 books. I write for Psychology Today and a couple of articles recently in Fast Company. So I must have done something right by accident in terms of my original aspiration.
But I never actually
put myself out there as a freelance writer. I just sort of fell into it. And the bottom line was I'd never heard of the word networking before my father told me about this business 6 months previously. But it was what I did naturally.
Right.
I hadn't thought of becoming a professional speaker. I didn't know such a thing existed. I remember in one of my early jobs, I loved attending training courses. I worked for the government, and that had been something that had crossed my mind to become a trainer. But that had then been forgotten. But here I am now speaking and training. And I had as a kid, I'd gone to drama school. I auditioned for the RSC. So all of the different elements of what I do now all crop up in my career before, and my life before I got into this space, before I knew that they were routes I could pursue. But it was all by accident.
Building the skills before you knew it.
I was just going to say the building blocks of the business and the person that you are now. Yeah.
So, if you look at everything that I do now, all the clues are there in the first half of my life. But no careers advisor was ever going to tell you that that's the route for you to take.
Yeah, isn't it amazing how somehow you end up in the right place, and everything that you've done before feeds into who you've become and what you do. So Andy, tell us a bit more about the work that you're doing now. We can see how all these building blocks led to the passion that now drives you. What's the change that you want to see, and what is it that you do now with the amazing impact you're having around the world?
My LinkedIn professional headline starts with harnessing the power of professional relationships. And I've always said from the early days that we take our professional relationships for granted. We get very complacent about it. And if we took the time to be more thoughtful about building, nurturing, and leveraging the right relationships, we are both going to get the support that we need to achieve our career and our role objectives more quickly and more effectively, with more impact. And we're also going to support more people in a more impactful way as well. So if you want to take the real sort of high level overview of why this is so important in the world without wanting to sound pompous about it, if we can be far more thoughtful about the way we engage with people and develop relationships, everyone stands to benefit, because the support that we need is all around us. The trouble is, and one of the things I talk about a lot, is the blind spots we have, where if you think of anything you're trying to achieve at the moment, I can almost guarantee that there's more than one person. There's several people in your network who are in a position to help you and would be happy to help you. You're not asking them, and you're not enabling them to help you. There are other people in your network who are very well positioned to help you. You're not building the relationship to make them want to help you and put their heart and soul into it. And there are other people who could help you that you're not getting in front of. You're not getting to the starting point with, but yet there are people who could introduce you to them. So if you sat down and actually thought about this stuff, what more could you achieve, and how much more impact could you have in the world?
Wow. That alone is a challenging statement for all of us to start working on. Who is it that we know? And just to be clear, Andy, when you talk about professional relationships for people who are employed, for example, are you talking about relationships in the workplace, relationships outside the workplace, with clients? How are you defining professional relationships?
Yes.
I knew you'd say that.
All of the above.
Any relationship related to the world of work, and
Right.
if you really want to go the whole hog, it could be family and friends, where you're having conversations that are related to your respective jobs. It's something that I've talked about a lot in the past. I don't talk about as much now, just because you're always, focusing on prioritizing the areas you focus on. But particularly as Brits, we tend to draw a big, bold, thick line between our personal and professional lives.
Yeah.
There might have been a time when that was more of a fit than it is now. I still believe that it's never been a thick, bold line.
Right. Yeah.
But I don't think we should see our relationships like that, because everyone, you see them in the context of your relationship with them, but they have a life beyond the life they have with you.
Yeah.
So if you're not talking to your cousin about professional life, you might be missing a huge opportunity to help them or for them to help you. And actually, what I found is that with some of my personal contacts, particularly family, we've grown closer when we've talked about work, 'cause it's what we share in common the most, in
Right.
that we set
Yeah.
up our own businesses. So that's brought us closer together. So this whole rule about not crossing that line, I think, is damaging. You should look at every relationship individually and look at that person. You know, I've got professional contacts who want to keep things at arm's length and just professional, and I've got professional contacts who've become best friends. You know,
Yeah.
I've been an MC at a wedding for a close friend I met professionally. And I've got personal contacts who I've, as I said, got closer to when we talked about business. I got personal contacts you would never talk about work with. So I
Yeah.
think you look at it on an individual basis. But in answer to your original question, I'm talking about the relationships, whether they are within or without the company you work for or you run, the relationships that have an impact on your career and have an impact on your role.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. And I love the way you say, you know, we draw this thick line between personal and professional. And for all its ills, I think one of the things that COVID gifted us with was this peek into people's personal lives and allowing us to be whole again so that we can turn up as a professional, but with families and kids and pets, because it was all visible on Zoom. So suddenly we're able to talk about it. And of course, with hybrid working, the work life and home life are far more integrated. How are you seeing that turn up differently in the work that you do? This concept of the whole person and integrating personal, professional life with relationships.
Well, I think that the hybrid working has pros and cons, which is probably not the most controversial statement I'll ever make. But you know, just to reflect what you just said, I've always really one comment that was made to me that really resonated was I was talking to a partner of a major law firm, major accountancy firm that I work with, and we were talking about vulnerability within the organization. And
Hmm.
he said how at the beginning of COVID, the managing partner, who I know and is a really approachable person anyway, but he had delivered what they call the town hall, you know, the all hands
Hmm.
meeting, you know, virtually from his second bedroom. And that humanized him for a lot of the
Yeah.
firm who perhaps hadn't had the chance to talk to him one-on-one as much. And that really impacted. And I heard similar recently. I mean, that's a story I was told during the pandemic. But
Hmm.
actually, someone told me in the last few weeks, a very similar story about, I can't remember who it was, but it was a senior leader in their organization who had, at the beginning of the pandemic, delivered from home and his dog had jumped on his lap. And everyone in the organization was suddenly in the chat saying, "What's his name? And tell us about your dog."
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
Yeah.
just created a different level of connection. I remember talking
Absolutely.
to a senior banker on a call, and she's a very senior with one of the major banks at an international level. And we were on a call, and first her dog jumped on her lap, and then the doorbell went, and it was Amazon, and she was on a headset, and she carried on answering the door, talking to the Amazon delivery driver while on the phone to me, and it just shifted
Yeah.
from where you would previously go into their headquarters in Canary Wharf, go into a meeting room, you know, all that formality, however well we got on, which we do.
Hmm.
So I think that we see people as more human.
Yeah.
I was reading a book this morning where the comment in there was, "Who wears suits anymore?" And I mean, I wear my suit so infrequently now. And you know, if I'm delivering a presentation virtually, I would wear a shirt to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, people watching the video now can see I'm very casually dressed. You know, and I would happily wear a polo shirt on a mentoring call. Whereas if I was going to the office to mentor, I would probably wear a suit or would have
Yeah.
done in the
Hmm.
past. So I
Yeah.
think we've relaxed in that sense. Um, the downside is what I have observed is that we have less small talk on virtual meetings.
Yes.
So if I came to meet you in an office, you'd greet me at the door or at reception. As we walked to the meeting room, you'd ask me what I call the hump day question, which is Monday or Tuesday, you say, how was your weekend? Thursday and Friday, you say,
Yep.
what have you got planned for the weekend? And on Wednesday, you don't know what to say.
Yeah, what's coming
And
up for the
then
weekend?
you pour me a glass of water. Some people have tea or coffee, and that during that you have small talk.
Yeah.
And then when the meeting's finished, you walk back to reception and you probably ask me where I'm going next. That's the question everyone asks in that environment. We go on Zoom or Teams and everyone sits there on mute while we wait for the last person to join. And then we go into the agenda and we get to the end of the meeting, and whoever's left, because people book back-to-back meetings to the hour, to the minute, which we don't do in person. So people are dropping off with 5 minutes to go, 3 minutes to go, 1 minute to go. You get no small talk.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think we have really lost that. And coupled to that is what's known, I guess, in America it emanates from, as most language does these days, water cooler conversations. When you're in an office, you walk around, you talk to people. When I used to work in big offices, I'd always walk around, talk to people at their desks, go to lunch with people. And if people are going for a smoking break or making a tea or coffee or whatever, you chat. Don't have that anymore. So that impacts relationships in the organization, cross-team relationships. The amount of teams that I've spoken to who are hybrid working, so they arrange that their team will come in on this day. So our team comes in on a Tuesday. So my first question to them is, well, how are you building relationships with other teams if they're coming in on Wednesday and Thursday?
Yeah.
Not thinking about those relationships.
Exactly.
So lots of changes.
But the challenge, I think what it's doing is it's forcing us to become far more intentional about things that used to happen automatically, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, because even if we didn't have hybrid working from home, we're now more global and we have offices across the world in different time zones. How do we build those relationships as well? So I think the shift in the workplace is forcing us to become far more intentional and, as you said earlier, thoughtful about relationships in general. And Angie, I don't know if this is something you're going to go on to later, or maybe we can talk about it now. You talk about different stages of relationships and how you kind of nurture it along, what is it, 6 or 7 different points. Can we talk about that a bit?
Yeah, of course. You decide what I talk about, so I have no plan
Okay, good.
of what I'm going to raise or otherwise. All down to you. So I have a model of the 7 stages of professional relationship. So I have a problem with how we typically see networks, because we talk about networks as if they're binary. You're in my network or you're out. People say, how many people can the average person have in their network? That doesn't allow for the fact that networks are living, breathing things with people coming in and out and going on a journey within. So rather than shaking hands when you meet at a conference, exchanging cards if people still do that, and then connecting on LinkedIn and thinking, well, they're in my network now, you realize that's just the beginning. And if I don't do anything about it, then they'll be out of my network. So Jonathan, you mentioned at the start of the call before we went live that you and I met a number of years ago when you were in previous employment and I was delivering some training there. But we didn't nurture that. So if we'd had a conversation then and we'd spoken again a month later, we'd have remembered each other. But when you then go 8 years later or whatever it might be, we're starting again. We weren't in each other's networks. We never maintained the conversation. That's the mistake a lot of people make, particularly using social media, which does make our network building lives easier, but it invites more complacency. Because it literally is, I can be talking to someone, walk away from the conversation, look at my phone, and I've already got a connection request from them. And I think that's it. If I just walk away, click accept, that's not network building. So the 7 stages of a professional relationship are: initially you recognize each other. So if we go back, Jonathan, to that original conversation, as I say, if we've met a week or a month later, we'd have recognized each other. Then you get to the point where you know each other. So the next time we meet, I know who you are and where I've met you before and what you do, and vice versa. Then we get to the point where we're starting to really generate a relationship and we like and trust each other. So those are stages 3 and 4. Sitting somewhere hidden in the middle of those two is respect. And I think there's a little virtuous triangle of the three, or virtuous circle, but like, trust, and respect. And actually, you're not going to always like people that you meet. Doesn't mean you dislike them, but you might not find rapport with them, but you might respect them. Now, if you like each other, you've got more momentum behind the relationship. You're more likely to go further. If you simply respect each other, I think there's a lower limit to where the relationship can develop. But it's still very valid. So we've gone recognize, know, like, trust. Now that's levels 1 to 4. We then get into what I call the sweet spot, which is levels 5 and 6. Level 5 is supporter. Level 6 is advocate. A supporter is someone who, if you pick up the phone and ask for help, they will be happy to help you. An advocate, you don't have to pick up the phone. While we're having this conversation, there might, any of the three of us might, or any of the listeners, someone we know could be in a meeting that we don't know about, and something comes up where we would want our name to be mentioned. Our advocates recognize that, know what to say, and say it. And then level 7 is friend, where they move into your personal network. That's not our goal. That's not our objective. It's lovely when it happens, and it's appropriate. You know, I work with pharmaceutical reps and healthcare reps, for example. It's not appropriate for them necessarily to become friends with the pharmacists or the healthcare professionals that they're selling to. So it's not always appropriate. You know, Jonathan, you worked in a compliance heavy industry as well. There will be relationships where you shouldn't be friends.
Absolutely.
So it's there, and it's nice when it happens, and it's appropriate, but it's not our goal. That sweet spot of supporter and advocate professionally is what we're looking for.
That's gone.
So interesting to see that process mapped out there. I'm thinking about some experiences I've had recently in the last few months, actually, because I've started getting into golf, and as you know, golf is that one of those sports that's sort of recognized as maybe the ultimate networking business tool. You get out there and you do all your business. And I was having a direct conversation with one of the guys I met for the first time the other day, actually, just saying, you know, what's been his experience, because he's been playing for 30 years. And he's saying, actually, you don't do business on the golf course. But what you do is you take that time to just get to know the people around you. And it's an opportunity to get to know people who you might not otherwise know, because it just happens as something that you have in common here. Out you go onto the golf course and you spend, whether it's 2 hours if you're doing 9 holes, or 4 hours if you're going the full round of the 18. And it's just an opportunity to get to know the person and build that, as you said, know, like, trust. Will they become a supporter? Will they become an advocate? Just seeing that play out there.
Yeah, I used to play golf. The way I played golf, I wouldn't see anyone else I was playing with for the whole 18 holes. I'd be spending most of the time in the trees, in the water, in the rough. So we'd meet on the tee and at the green, and park comfortably as you went down. Well, they might go down the fairway, I wouldn't. And I used to be a member at Potter's Bar when there was a golf club there. There's a lovely concept in golf, the 19th hole. So anyone who knows about golf knows there's 18 holes on a golf course. The 19th hole is where you do business. You never talk about business on the course itself. That's the golden rule. And I remember once, back when I was playing regularly, and I was running networking groups, and there was someone who I knew wanted to sell his products to us. And he had connected with me through an early online network called Academy. And he kept asking for a meeting, and I wasn't driven enough. You know, I knew what he wanted. It wasn't really of that much interest that I could find the time in my diary. And then one day he said, "Do you play golf?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Would you I'm a member at Hadley Wood in North London. Would you be interested in a round?" Now, Hadley Wood is quite an exclusive private golf club. You can't just walk in and play a green fee and play. There's some lovely stories about Hadley Wood, which I maybe not share here. Remind me when we finish. Remind me when we finish recording. It's one of my favourite stories, but I'm not sure it's podcast worthy. But anyway, so he, instead of getting a half-hour meeting with me, which he couldn't get, he ended up with a 3.5, 4 hour meeting with me.
Wow.
And actually, what was really interesting and goes to that rule about not talking business on the golf course, we're standing on the tee and someone else comes up, and it's I think it was his friend or a family member, and he'd just come along to play with us as well. Nothing to do with business at all. And we teed off. They went down the fairway. I went into the rough, and we started our journey. And we got to the end of the round, and it must have been about 4 or 4:30 in the afternoon. It was an afternoon game, or just my golf was really bad that day, and it took 8 hours. And I was very conscious that I had to get around the M25 to get home and the motorway, and I didn't really fancy the traffic, so I was quite keen to get moving. And he said, "Will you stay for a drink?" And I was like, "Well, I really want to get moving." He said, "We'll just stay for one." And I couldn't say no. He got 3 referrals from me over one drink.
Wow.
Oh, really?
19th hole.
There you
So he didn't get our business, but he got 3 referrals, which is potentially more valuable.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's just, 4.5 hours together, but it's the 20 minutes in the bar at the end where you talk about work, and it's okay. But it's a relationship building exercise.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And a question that I have, Andy, being thoughtful about building relationships, but being authentic at the time. How do you help people find the right balance?
Great, that's so
Because
good,
that's the thing that always puts people off of networking and building relationships intentionally.
Yeah, it's a great question. I always talked about being strategic about building relationships, but not letting anyone feel networked by you.
Yeah.
And we all know that feeling where we feel like we're being networked.
Yeah.
And it is quite achievable. And I use that term that you used there, being thoughtful, more and more, because I think it's a bit softer than strategic, but I want to be careful not to soften up being strategic too much, because it is a hard message. You need to think about this stuff and you need to plan it out. But here's what you do. You do your strategic work in the background. You sit there and you think, okay, what am I trying to achieve? And I have an app that we've been developing and we'll be launching, hopefully over the next few months. We're piloting it with some clients at the moment, called the Relationship Matrix. You use something like the Relationship Matrix, which says, what am I trying to achieve? It's objective driven. Who are the key stakeholder groups that can help me? The groups of people I need on my side. Who do I know in those groups, and how strong is my relationship with them? And how can they help me? And I've got 4 eyes. Are they influencers, introducers, sources of information, insight and ideas, or implementers? And you score each of those out of 5. So you can look at it and, I think I referenced this earlier. You can look and say, who's in a position to help me, would want to help me, but isn't. Yep. Who's in a position to help me, but maybe won't want to. And who's in a position to help me, but I don't know them, and who can introduce me. So that's very strategic. Then once having done that work, I might identify, well, Andrea can help me, but she's not, and she's well equipped to. Andrea, have you got time for coffee? Let's have a conversation. So when we have that conversation, depending on the nature of our relationship, which I've identified is strong, I can be quite direct and say, look, I'm trying to achieve this. It occurred to me you could help me. Would you be willing to help me? Now, you're not going to feel networked by me because it's a natural human conversation. Where I'm being quite upfront, and you still about have the help I'm asking for, but it's built on solid foundations over years, potentially. Whereas if I recognise that Jonathan could help me, but maybe his heart and soul wouldn't be into it, I just say, well, let's park the objective for the moment and focus on the relationship. And I just invest in that relationship over a period of time. So that's one part of it. So you're doing that work in the background. The next thing is that you then engage with people on a human level and you take yourself out of the equation. So you listen, but you listen for them, not to them. You really engage. You're curious, genuinely curious, and you seek to find out how you can help them, not in a quid pro quo way. If I've helped you, you owe me. You invest in your network and you take back from your network, but it might be to and from different people. It's that abundance mentality that comes to provide the return on investment over time, not the direct relationship. Because that's, again, when people feel networked, is because you said, I've helped you, now you owe me something. So you've got to move away from that.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
My favorite
Exactly
quote
right.
is, blessed are they who give without remembering and receive without forgetting. Give without remembering, receive
Oh,
without
love
forgetting.
that. Yeah.
Elizabeth Ascobesco. It's a lovely quote, and it underpins everything that I'm talking about. But you just go and invest in those relationships. So you talk to people, you're curious about people, you listen for people, and if you can help them, you can. And you're building relationships all the time. And then when you need help, it's natural to ask.
Yeah.
And that's where you want to be. When you're asking for help, when it is natural to do so, but you're investing in the relationships up front without doing it towards that definitive end.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
I want to hear, I'm conscious of time though, Andy, but I want to hear a little bit, at least a little bit about the latest book, the Financial Times Guide to Mentoring. It just out a couple of months ago. Tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, so it's quite interesting when I look at the 6 books I've written. They sort of track the journey of my career, and they sort of build on each other. So my 5th book was called Just Ask, which was about vulnerability, and I talked a bit about mentoring within the pages of Just Ask, and I've talked about mentoring for a number of years. But I recognised at that stage that was the most natural next step for me, and over the course of 2022. I found myself delivering a lot of mentoring programs for large organizations, mainly in Asia. And what I've seen over the years, and this goes back for years and years, is when I've been working with or talking to groups in large organizations and mentoring comes up, people don't typically know where their mentoring program is, how to access it, does it even exist, who's a mentor on it.
We've seen that.
It's almost half-hearted, the whole approach.
Mm-hmm.
And people get the value of mentoring, but they're not necessarily following through. What I've also seen is I think a lot of mentoring relationships fail to get off the ground because it's like so many of these things. People say, oh, you should have a mentor. Not what you should get out of it, not why you should have a mentor, but you should have a mentor.
Yep.
And people find someone, a line manager, or volunteer to be their mentor or whatever it might be. It could be completely the wrong person for them. If it is their line manager, it's absolutely the wrong person. And they don't set an objective, they don't track, they don't review. So there's so much missing from mentoring relationships.
Yeah.
And I'd got to know a chief learning officer for anesthesiology at Weill Cornell Medical School in New York, and she was a former assistant dean of mentoring there. And we've talked a lot about this topic. We were both part of a mentoring organization stateside. And I said to her, would you like to write this book with me? And I'm delighted with what we've come up with over a number of months putting this together. Ruth is the academic. She's very research driven, data driven. So although my other books have citations and references, they're not referenced to the level this is. Working with an academic really,
next level stuff.
I mean, she'll typically write an academic paper that has to be backed up to the hilt. And so, you know, when I was bringing in experts, she would challenge the experts. Are they expert enough? Do they have the credentials? So it really was a really good quality check on what we were doing. She also happens to be a very good writer and storyteller, which helps. So we've written a book that it's 3 parts to the book. It's predominantly written for mentors. How do you become a better mentor and make the impact? Because the other thing that both Ruth and I have found is there's lots of training for mentees, but we tend to assume that mentors know what they're doing.
Exactly, yeah.
So it's written for mentors, but there's also advice on finding a mentor and getting more value as a mentee where it isn't already covered in the mentors section. And there's a section on being a better advocate for mentoring aimed at organizations. So how do you create a mentoring culture in your organization, make it aspirational, make it accessible?
Yeah, brilliant. I think, well, you're going to have another one sold in a moment because that's definitely one that we'll be going after. Andy, we're conscious of time, as John said, and there's so many different directions we could go in. Maybe it would be great to have you back for another conversation.
Yeah.
But for now, what advice would you give to people, I guess, at different stages of their career, maybe starting out in their career or those at the pinnacle of their career, about investing in professional relationships? What advice, how to start, how do they do it?
If I was to give one piece of advice, and actually different conversations like this, I might give different advice, which I guess is good for people who listen to me on podcasts more than once. But the one that springs to mind now is, I talk a lot in my presentations and training about Stephen Covey's emotional bank accounts, which I touched on a few minutes ago, that you're investing in your relationships. And I think that's really important because we tend to focus on short-term needs, and it depends on your job. But so many jobs people are overburdened with short-term priorities, particularly. I mean, my last corporate job was listed on the New York Stock Exchange, the company, not me, not my job. The company was listed on the New York Stock Exchange, which meant that it wasn't responsive to the needs of the contract I ran. It was responsive to the quarterly results on the New York Stock Exchange. And we can take that short-term mindset into our relationships, and that's where people are asking for help when they haven't built the relationship first, where people feel networked by someone. Think long-term. So many people I work with are in their 20s, in their 30s, in their 40s, even in their 50s, like me. You've still got decades ahead of you in your career. And now I'm in my 50s. I'm getting help and support from people I met 20 years ago. So just because someone isn't relevant to you now and the right person for you now, it doesn't mean you shouldn't build a relationship with them, because you want to be building that relationship. You want to be building that network of people who will grow with you and who will be there to support you as your career flourishes and theirs does in tandem. And you can actually be at a relatively junior role now. If you're building relationships with people of similar ambition, similar talent, similar drive, you may find yourself moving into senior leadership roles surrounded by senior leaders across organizations because you've been investing for the long term.
Yeah. It reminds me of a conversation we had on another podcast where the advice this boss was giving to this new manager was, we'll stay focused on building the relationship because there could come a time where you will end up being my boss. So I want to look after you on the way up. So you look after me on the way down. I thought that was, very poignant.
But I love the language. If you think about it, then a network of supporters, advocates, and potential friends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's not to love?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Amazing. Is there anything that we've not touched on, Andy, that you'd like to just throw in there? Something that you've been thinking about, you wanted to share?
No, I think there's so many different areas, as you said, Andrew, that we could go in. I wouldn't necessarily pick up on one thing. I think hopefully we've given people lots of food for thought today. There is a lot more, but hopefully it will give people an appetite to get in touch and find out more.
Absolutely, which brings us neatly onto the how do they get in touch. We will have links in the show notes, but what's the easy answer to that question?
When you've got a surname like mine, I'm not hard to find as long as you can spell it correctly. So yeah, I'm on the main social platforms. Maybe a little bit old for TikTok and Snapchat, but I'm on the main platforms. And if you look for Andy Lopata, you're going to find me. If there's one link I would share, it's my link tree. linkatr.ee/Andy Lopata, because then you've got my Psychology Today blog, you've got my podcast, you've got my books. And what we also have is a range of different assessments. So there's a professional relationships assessment, a support scorecard, and a transform your mentoring journey assessment. So you can take those quick quizzes and start to identify where you could really make a difference for yourself.
Amazing.
There's been so much good stuff in there. The technology has let us down a little bit with some buffering going on. Let's hope that doesn't show through in the actual. But Andy, thank you so much. We will definitely put that Linktree link in the show notes, and hopefully we have you again another time.
Yeah, look forward to it.
Thank you so much.
Be great. I don't know if you're aware, but you said with some buffering going on, and then I completely lost you. So that was perfect
Well, there you
timing.
go.
But I'm sure everyone else caught you. So yes, it's been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Well, to our listeners around the world, we say bye-bye for now and see you on the next episode.
See you on the next one.
Bye-bye.
We hope you enjoyed that episode. And if you did, and you want to hear more, the best thing to do is subscribe. Then you'll never miss an episode. There's a new one every Friday. You can stay connected with us on social media at The 4 Habits for updates, behind-the-scenes content, and to participate in discussions related to the show. We always love to hear from you. And of course, if you've enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a review on your preferred platform to allow us to reach more listeners and help people around the globe radically transform the way they do relationships so they too can enjoy better harmony at home, thrive at work, and win at life.